What's up, humans? Welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. I'm Luke Rain, and this is episode 93, Agent M on beat battles and collaboration. This week, our guest is Agent M, a producer from Seattle who's now located in Atlanta. He came up through the beat battle scene in Seattle and beyond with iStandard, Death by Stereo, Beatmatch, and more. Now he has moved on to collaboration with other producers and artists such as Osbee Chill, Marl, Ilana, Latnie, and a collab beat tape with BlackaDinMe as Agent Black. The song of the week is Agent M Marinatin, a super chill beat you hear behind me. You can go get the links to that down below. We also included a link to his whole project, Agent Black Classified with BlackaDinMe on Bandcamp, and those are some crazy sick beat battle beats with some amazing sample flips that you will definitely recognize. I highly recommend going and check that out. I just bumped the whole thing front to back after recording this podcast. It's amazing. Support our sponsors. That's Dojo TV, where you can get free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis. Yummy Strums, where you can get high quality guitar samples, loops, one-shots, and more from our very own Tesko. Weekly download, where you can learn from our mentor, Il Gates, and his private weekly group lessons, and get access to over 250 more episodes in the archive for just $20 a month. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class is free. You can find way more about us, our socials, free sound packs, etc. at thehumanmusicpodcast.com. But let's get on into this episode with Agent M.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesko with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, humans? Welcome back. It's the Human Music Podcast. Delay. And today, we have a very special guest. My man, the one, the only, the legend himself, in my eyes.
Hey.
Agent M. Woo! Hey, ow. What's good,
Hey,
buddy?
man, I need this in my life more. I need some cheers like that more. That's motivational right there.
Shit, just give me a call, man. We'll just, I'll just hype you up for like 15 minutes and just rock out.
Hey, man. All right, hey, I'm gonna hold you to that.
Yeah, amen, man. So the way we generally start these guest interview episodes is I say, Agent M, what is your superhero origin story?
Oof. Well, let's see. I mean, I've been making music for a long time, probably since 2007 or so.
Woo! Better.
I actually started on Ableton. My mom got me, or actually, that's not true. I started kind of doing, I guess, maybe the equivalent of like remixes on GarageBand.
Hey.
I think something inspired me. Like I had a couple like the Reanimation CD with Jay-Z and Linkin Park, and then like the Verve and stuff like that. So I thought it was cool mixing different genres. So there was like they had random stock beat breaks or something on there, and I would just toss on and try to mix different songs and come up with cool ideas. And then eventually I got Ableton Live once my mom saw I was kind of into that. And then just started from that, quickly hopped over to Reason. I can't remember who it was recommended I try it. And I just liked how it just how to navigate the program and stuff a little bit more. But I've been making beats on that probably, I'd say, I don't know, maybe a couple years into it.
Reason, gang.
Yeah, man, Reason, and then Reason's come a long way too. So it's kind of cool to grow with the program that, looking back at wasn't that great, but
yeah, just still waiting on that VST3 update. Come on, guys.
Exactly.
I got plugins I'm trying to buy.
So sad. So
it's
sad.
very unreasonable. They've developed some good stuff because of the limited access to everything. But I think the real, origin of me taking this more seriously than, making some music and not really knowing what was going to happen with it, was probably around 2016. I just had a lot of life changes. I got out of a long relationship, had, quit a job I'd been at for, 5-6 years. Just wasn't really happy. I was doing sales. and just I was making music, but wasn't really having much energy when I'd get home to do it. And then I actually entered an iStandard show. I can't remember where it was, but I got third place in it. Something that allowed me to do this.
It's one of those ones down to Studio 7.
Yeah, it was one of I think it was the last one they did at Studio 7. And I just scraped by, got in the top 3, still didn't really know what I was doing. Looking back now, I'd say that the beats I made were not very good, especially the mix. But then, actually, qualified. They had a Beast of the Beats annual show that was in LA. And, where people come from all over the place, and there's a lot of really good talent. And I went against a guy named Nabian, if you've heard of, he's like had crazy placements, and he's an amazing producer. And Google it was, a beat battle experience that, I was not really prepared for at the time. It was pretty lopsided. And I didn't take it very well, but the funny thing is, it's actually where I met Trap, because he came up and approached me. And I'm glad he did, because I just wasn't, I thought everything was about the beat battle, which, I found out later that's not really the point of those competitions. It's fun, but it's more about linking with people. And luckily, Trap afterwards came up to me, kind of saw I was down, just because, I don't know, I wasn't really being a social butterfly as I should, but Trap, come with a big smile on his face. Yo, man, what's up? I'm from Seattle too. And then, basically since then we just became friends, and he's kind of tuned me into a network of different people. Through iStandard, I kind of learned that, like I said, it's not just about, winning a beat battle, it's about networking and stuff, but it also got me interested in beat battling, and kind of did a lot of beat battles back in Seattle, and really kind of honed my mixing skills. And that really elevated my production. And then the next hurdle that I had to overcome was getting stuff ready for artists, because once I was getting pretty good at beat battling and starting to win some, and I thought my beats were sounding real cool, I would show those beats to artists, and they would be very confused on where they fit in. So that was a nice little next level up thing, and I felt like I've become pretty good with that too. So I like kind of doing both, but I think a lot of people that have, people that have heard of my name, it's usually from beat battle stuff, just because there was a couple beat battles in iStandard that floated around. And I just like doing them. Like I said, I think it's a fun thing to, it's like a competition, or like the Olympics of beat making, I guess, for me, where it's, it's competition. It's basically, producers impressing other producers, but it's very fun.
Yeah, shouts out to some of those Seattle beat battles. There was Death by Stereo, that series that Feeds the Germ put on. Those were super fun.
Yes.
I was in a few of those too. And and then you got really deep in that Beatmatch one.
Yeah, and that was fun too, there, because thinking back on all those, just the lessons I learned from different ones, because there was a lot of kind of hip hop trap influence in the Death by Stereo beat battles. But what's cool about the Beatmatch is there was more of electronic influence, and it was more about like, I still was able to get pretty far because I had some cool beats, but I think what didn't translate is that the people that ended up winning that, the couple of years I watched and the one I participated in, they've had really, not necessarily like smack you in your face kind of battle beats, but just stuff that like kind of moved the crowd and got people, like the crowd, really into it, and was like kind of dancey a little bit. And I really like that aspect, because it was a different, something that I wasn't really used to, and it was something to add to the arsenal. So I started making some beats that, kind of tailored that way. And, unfortunately, I was hoping to do it again. I think that's right. Right around the year I was going to do another one is kind of when everything started getting crazy with the panorama. And, but yeah, no, that Beatmatch was great. And also it's just the crowd too. That's a really big, important part. There were some good ones at Death by Stereo, but I think the biggest one I had been to at that point was that Beatmatch crowd, because they had a really dope community that really came in, supported, and kind of packed the house, which always makes it more fun.
So for myself, and probably a lot of people listening that haven't been to a beat battle or aren't familiar with the format, like, can you explain kind of what happens? Because it seems like it's a pretty big part of the connection between you two. So if you could explain just kind of like generally how a beat battle works, and also what you just mentioned made me think of, like, I also don't know what kind of beat would work. Like what normally wins a beat battle? Like what?
Yeah, well, just to kind of give the answer first is it's preference. And that's something that takes a while to learn in beat battles, especially when there's people that are, if you're having two people that are like, sometimes it's very clear just a lot of times when it comes to the quality, but if both producers have good quality beats, it kind of depends on who's judging. And like I said, it depends on the format too. Like I knew that in Death by Stereo, they really liked the kind of, like I had a boom bap drums that, kind of gave a hip hop feel and people really vibed with that. But, in the Beatmatch stuff, they kind of had, like I said, a little bit more, there's a lot of synths and a lot of transitions and more kind of like thematic type of beats. And so it really comes down to preference, which is, tough for some people to take. But going back to the format of the beat battling, it's usually just, there's been a couple tournaments that I've been a part of, which I really enjoy because, you have different competitors and you get to play more beats, which is always my goal from all these things. I just like to play music and see what people's reactions are because it's a live feedback. And of course it's fun to win stuff, but my goal in these beat battles is just to play as much, get as far as I can so I can play as many beats as I can. But they usually just, you have either they'll pick a round, let's say me and Luke or me and Trap are battling and it's 2 beats each. And they'll usually have a panel. Sometimes they'll use the audience. I'm not a huge fan of that because it always comes down to who has more people there supporting them usually. Yeah. But it's fun to have them involved, like maybe as like a 4th judge or something for a tiebreaker. But it's good to have judges, in my opinion. So then we'd each play a beat, and like I said, sometimes it's just a one-off. Sometimes it's best of 3. Sometimes it's 2 beats. But then after that, you usually get feedback from the judges, which is again one of the most valuable points. I can speak for myself, and I know that Trap went through this well, but you learn a lot. Beat battles are, you're on stage, so you're in front of a lot of people, and if the beat's not it, you kind of know it, and then you get to hear it again from the judges, and it sucks, but it's also the quickest way to learn. Yeah. Like I said, when the place where I met Trap like that, I got completely, my morale was down. I wasn't talking with anybody. And like I said, luckily he came and talked to me, but it's tough, man, being on stage. And especially if you get kind of blown out of the water by somebody, but you get to, get the critiques from the judges. And if you take that and you learn from it, it's, like I said, it's a good way to sharpen the steel if you will, for the.
It sounds like a pretty tough place to cut your teeth with like you're up in front of a bunch of people and you got a bunch of judges that know what they're talking about. And they're just going to eat you alive if you didn't throw something good out there. I can obviously see how it would push you to become a better producer rather quickly, which is cool. Plus you get feedback you can trust, right?
100%.
I feel like and correct me if I'm wrong, another interesting aspect of this would be what beats do you play in the early rounds and what do you try and save? Because if you lose playing some beats that you thought were okay, that can you play beats twice? Probably not, right?
No, not in the same. Well, no, I mean, I don't think anybody. I haven't seen that happen. Not in the same beat battle. Like you could probably play a beat that you've played before, but even that, sometimes I feel like people may notice. But if you have one that works really well and it's a different platform, I say go for it. But as far as what to play, I think it really depends on. This is where doing a lot of battles. I picked up little things from people that had been in a lot of battles before me. Things like if you never want to really hold back. If you have something and you're going first, it's really important because you could hear somebody especially if you've done it for a while. Like since I have a lot of beats over the years that are good for beat battles, and I kind of have an idea of what
that Toto Hold the Line remix and exactly. The Road Jack remix come right to mind, bro. Always
exactly, yeah. Well, see, there's a cheat code in that too. Is if you take a popular sample and you can kind of have people hear it and they're like, oh God, I hope they don't mess this up, is usually at least what I think when I hear somebody do that. Yeah, and if you can execute, it's kind of a double-edged sword because if you can execute, then people go crazy. But if it's underwhelming, they're like, oh man, well, because they know what it sounds like. So if you don't mix it up a bit or change it enough, then it can be disappointing. But you don't want to hold back, especially if you have to go first and you don't know who you're going against or if you've never heard their stuff, because you don't, there's so many crazy producers that I've still never heard of and that just blow me away when I listen to their stuff. Yeah. So you don't want to be that person that's like, oh, I was holding it for the last round. But at the same time, if you think you can play something that's a little bit less, that's why going second, usually people choose to go second. There's usually a coin flip or something just so you can counter what they have. Cause maybe they have something that's, really, boom bap. But you can also see what the crowd reacts to, because if they play something and the crowd's kind of like so about it, like, okay, maybe I'll go a different direction and play something that's a little more this, in this genre or whatever.
Yeah, you really got to read the format too. Like, for example, like these ones he's talking about are generally like the Death by Stereo ones, where it was like multiple beats back and forth between two producers, and then each round like gets judged, and then overall it's like who won, like NBA playoffs or something, right?
Yeah.
Whereas like iStandard, when you got to Beast of the Beats and that final national championships, the first round is just one beat each. You don't get to pick who goes first, and you have to, before the weekend even starts, submit all your beats in order. So you got to like put them in order and be like, all right, well, front load with the heat, because the more times you're on stage, the more people notice you and the more people are going to want to come network with you. So it's like, if you were like, well, I'll probably make it through the first round, so let me put my weak beats there, my dope beats in the last round. But if you don't make it to the last round, who cares? I'd rather look weak as one of the top 10 competitors. I'd rather be 10th out of 10 out of 100 than 99 out of 100 with all my dope beats on deck.
Yeah, that no one gets to hear.
Yeah.
Man, that's rough.
That's such an interesting ripple. Like, I have no idea how I would approach that.
I've even had homies that went super deep on it, where they were like, so I looked at who the judges were going to be each day, and I like completely like planned my order based on who was going to be the judges that day and what kind of music they clearly like because they make it. And it's crazy, right? There's so many strategies.
Yeah, and I know that in the that's one thing I learned is that the final rounds people would put like hooks on their beat, because it is, and that's one thing is the iStandard versus something like a Death by Stereo or even Beatmatch is they really having a balance of like stuff that's hard hitting, because usually beat battles are within a minute or a minute 30 in some cases, so you want to put a lot of stuff in there, but you don't want to overwhelm people. I think usually like a transition or maybe two if you do it really carefully. But some people just have a loop, and it doesn't really change up much. And if it's playing for like a minute and a half, people are kind of like, okay, kind of got tired of it after 30 seconds, and nothing changed. And it's kind of, but with iStandard, it seemed like the people that went far, and the best reception was beats that had like moments of like openness where you could hear an artist on it, and then you had it mixed with very intricate transitions and things that kind of keep the ear of people, but is still leaving it open, because they tied a lot of their events, which was one of the cool things about iStandard, is they would also have events where they had songwriters, and a lot of songwriters were present there as well too. So they were trying to encourage people to work together.
Yeah,
so
they called that cool. Power of the Pen. And so like it would be Beast of the Beats Championship and Power of the Pen Championships in the same weekend. It's badass.
Yeah.
So speaking of styles and preferences and all that, what is the Agent M style? What are you inspired by? What do you look for in music? And what's your secret weapon going into these kind of beat battles, or even when you're just working with the artist? What do you feel like is your signature?
Yeah. Well, I think I've always really enjoyed like when I really started getting into music, and even especially beat making, I listened to a lot of like 90s era hip hop. I really liked Outkast, so like Organized Noise, and so I really liked that organic kind of swingy drums, and I think that is what a lot of people, especially for beat battles, because a lot especially when I started doing beat battles, trap was huge, so you have these crazy like 808 bends and stutters and all these really cool tricks that I didn't really know how to do, but then I would come with some of the boom bap beats, and then it was a lot of times it'd be one of the few in beat battles. I think now it's a little bit different. It seems like there's a lot of hip hop music kind of gearing back towards those like organic drum sounds and funk. I think swingy drums, bass lines, West Coast influence, but I like to evolve. I feel like I have in different, like I'll attack different genres with, if I'm working with artists. Like recently I've really started doing a lot of kind of more upbeat, 100 to 110 BPM, kind of funky, I don't know, stuff you'd hear like maybe Anderson .Paak or, like some, just kind of vibey hip hop influenced, but kind of more, I guess, more pop in my opinion. And that's been really fun to make. And so that's something that's a little bit more new. I feel like the style that I'm working on with artists. that's another sound that I'm developing. But definitely, yeah, boom bap swing is probably what most people would classify my go-to sound as.
You know, I would also throw in there like it's a mix of that like boom bap swing drum style, but also with like very like, you know, West Coast golden era hip hop influences too, of like your bass lines and your instrumentation that you put on top of it. Cause you know, like a lot of that boom bap stuff was so sample based. Like everything was like a grimy record sample. Whereas like your style is much more like using keyboards and soft synths to, you know, to construct your own melodics, which I think is a really good blend.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me.
Fan of your beats, man.
I appreciate that, man. No, this likewise. You know, we have some. I know we got plenty in the vault, and you know,
we got to come out with a beat tape. We were talking about that the other week. Like, man,
man, I know we have enough for a couple.
I know, right?
But just to touch on what you were talking about, and that actually just reminds me, going back to the origin story thing. It's an interesting way of. I thought about this recently about how, you know, obviously I feel like you develop your sound, or like with my specific sound, there's different, I guess, periods that I go through where I develop different aspects of the sound. And when I first made beats, I was sampling everything. I didn't really care because I was just doing it for fun. And then right as I was kind of taking it, you know, a little bit more seriously, and a lot of people were talking about getting sued and you don't want to sample. So I did try to learn the keys. I don't have any training or anything like that, but I did, you know, I can play the keys a little bit now. You know, I know basic theory, and doing that really helped, because just recently, actually, when like during the pandemic, I joined a lot of online communities where they have, you know, producers that I just gravitated certain ones that had, they were sampling heavy, kind of my style, where like boom bap, like really dope, just really dope producer communities, and they all were sampling stuff, and I realized that since I had really like not thinking about it and trying to do all my own melodies. Lots of people are coming out with sound packs, splices here. Like there's lots of things that, you know, got a bad rep because there's a lot of people that just are like, here's a drum loop and here's a melody loop, and I made a beat. And there's a lot of people that are do that or have, you know, I guess a variation from that. But I like to incorporate samples, and I feel like I can flip them enough. And it's something I used to do so much that I just feel really comfortable doing it. And I've started bringing those sound packs or whatever, you know, everybody has the availability to use the same sounds, some of the same sounds that I'm using. But I just am confident that I can flip them better. And then with adding some of the, you know, the melodies and stuff that I had practiced for the last couple of years, trying to avoid sampling, and then blending those two together, has been really fun, just because I always would get stuck with, when I would use samples, I would be hard to break away, because it's like, okay, here's the beat with the sample. And then it's like, all right, and then I take the sample out, and then the beat sounds, it's like, oh, there's that stock keyboard sound that makes it sound really weird now. But now that I've, you know, been able to kind of hone that craft, and, you know, obviously getting better VSTs help. Like I just got Arturia not too long ago, and that's been super fun, especially with like the warm synth sounds and all the cool effects that you can do on that. And then it's cool to be able to like maybe have a sample in there and then take the sample out, and it doesn't sound, it just enhances the beat, because it's like, okay, now there's a new section, and it, you know, to be able to kind of weave those two together has been really fun.
I've seen our mentor Il Gates do that a bunch. We calls it a spark, where it's like, ooh, this makes me want to make music around it. And then after a while, you'd be like, well, what happens if I mute that original spark sample? Like, oh, it's still dope, and now I don't have to credit anybody else. Cool. Just what I was inspired by hearing somebody else. All original now.
Yep. And, you know, I call them sprinkles too. Is like sometimes it is just a beat where you know, I've made all the stuff, and then I'm just like, I just want a little, just something, some ear candy, you know, then I'll go and maybe find a chord hit or something that I like, or a little horn sample or something, and, you know, try to chop it up, make it my own, but, you know, sprinkle it on top, and it just has that aesthetic and warmth of sample.
Mm-hmm. Sparks and sprinkles.
And sprinkles.
I'm curious from the drum side, because a lot of the music I do is mainly trap based, and I've done a few boom bap beats, but it's usually comes down to like taking full samples and chopping up and splicing them. I'm curious, how do you do your drums nowadays? I figure it's different from track to track, but like as far as retaining that kind of swung groovy feel and getting that boom bap feel, but still making it your own, like, do you do a lot of mix, like, do you use a lot of like just raw samples and do some processing on the group to make it sound like it was sampled off an old record, or do you do a combination? Like,
like how do you make some original nice swung boom bap drums?
Yeah, well, I think it is more about, and one thing that I went through a period of is I was actually using like trap drum elements, but still doing it boom bap cadences. And basically what that is just, I never had an MPC, but I've always like really thought it was cool to play. And again, I practiced for so long. Now I can, I'll still go in and program and tune things up, but most things, even if I'm playing the chords or if I'm, especially with the drums, I'll usually play, like I'll have a kick, a snare, and a hi-hat, and I'll just play it on the keyboard. And to get like the general swing, and then I'll go in and add little things like maybe a little roll here, or I can, nudge a note that was a little off. But sometimes, what I try to do is capture everything without having to nudge anything, and then, like fine tune, I guess. But yeah, it's a combination of one thing I thought sounded cool was, taking like a beat break or something, but then, chopping it at each individual jump hit in that break, and then just replaying the break. And then maybe tucking like more modern drums under it. So it had, and then messing with the levels, and mix them in together. So you have the aesthetic and like the warmth and, the crackle maybe of like a beat break drum with the, the punchiness and the mix of, more modern drums. And it gives it that old feel, but it doesn't sound, dated because of the quality of it.
Yeah, the
like
classic nostalgia feel, but the modern engineering aesthetic that lets it stand up, like say in a beat battle against another modern track, or
just like I've done beat or done like a boom bap beat, but then take like a trap. I would still have it swing a little bit, but those little like triplets and like having that sprinkled over a beat, a beat that sounds like it's boom bap beat, but it's like, well, there's little elements like that, or using an 808, a bouncy 808 with the beat, just experimenting it, because sometimes it sounds really weird. But sometimes it sounds cool. And I like to explore and try to create new sounds and blend different genres all the way back. Like I said, from just, blending a random beat break with a symphonic sample or something, just trying different things and seeing if it works.
Is boom trap a thing? Because I feel like it should be.
I was just
Yeah,
it. Illmind coined the phrase, I think.
Yeah,
and
it's
the
funny
godfather of sample packs.
Oh, Illmind?
Illmind,
yeah. It's funny because I heard him. So I used to listen to Blab Chat really heavily when I would be working, just because I was doing like, and this is after I quit my sales job and I started doing a job that paid less or whatever, but it was kind of construction based. But so I'd get a little bit of a workout and I'd just be listening to music or listening to podcasts all day that would get me excited to get home and make music, incorporate things I was learning about and listening to. And yeah, I remember him mentioning the boom trap sound thing, and I was like, well, I'd already been doing that. I didn't have a name for it, but I was like, so that is pretty much like, it's like, well, I guess I'm not, it's not as unique as I thought of taking taking more modern drums and having it be a, kind of a boom bap swing. But, hey, there's only so much originality under the sun, but, making it your own is getting certain swings and stuff. But yeah, I definitely kind of chuckled at that when I heard him say that. I was like, well, shit. He's already like done that and moved on from it.
That's such a big point. We said there's only so much originality to go around, and that's one thing I find. You just, I don't know about you, but I definitely went through a phase where I try to avoid samples and just do everything on my own, and it took that phase to come to the realization that samples just have so much character to them right off of the bat. And if you're trying to keep things really clean and modern and all that, sometimes it just lacks that character. And it's just like that undescribable magic, really, where it's just like, you're not going to get that just doing everything from scratch. And that's one thing, I've turned around and come back to, and like repurposing old stuff and modernizing it is like, it's the way now, I feel anytime I'm like lacking a little bit of character in a composition, it's just like, let's find a sample that we already know works and just sprinkle a little in there. Like you said, a little horn stab, a little whatever you got. And it like just brings it to life.
I feel like that's the funniest producer pitfall. Like this whole fallacy of like, when you're a beginner, you try and make everything like so polished and so clean, and like, how do I get it cleaner? How do I get it bigger and like more perfect? How do I get it more perfect? And then like you get to a point where then you're actually good and you're like, how do I make it sound more fucked up? Like I want it to be more human. Like I want there to be like some actual tone and warmth to it. Like, no, like, yeah, that might be perfect, but that's not actually what I want anymore. It's so funny. You go all the way back around.
All the way back around just to get RC20.
Yeah, you gotta get that dirty. You gotta get that dirty clean sound, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
I know. I actually learned about RC20 from H&M.
Oh yeah,
He was showing me
Yeah,
how dope
definitely.
that plugin is. I still don't
Yeah,
have it, but I saw how dope it was.
Well, there's, I mean, it's the same thing as like people being super hyped on specific DAWs. I mean, you can find a million plugins that do what it does. It's just, it gives it like you can easily add that warmth. I just like the reverb in it. So like sometimes I'll just use it. It just has multiple parameters and you can use them all together. But sometimes I'll just be like, oh, I like the reverb in it, or I like the way that, it does like an auto pan feature or something like that. But yeah, no, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, like I said, upgrading to like the Arturia sounds made a world of difference, because you can just tweaking, like I haven't even dug into half of the sounds that you get from that. I think I got the V collection,
so huge.
and just initially the sounds off the jump are awesome, and tweak a little bit, but then you can then if you add some effects on top of that, it's just night and day different from what I was used to try to make realistic sounds out of, like like I said, a stock Reason. Reason, I did find the thing that was cool again about Reason not having access to everything initially is there is a few really good sounds in there that I still use. Like one is just one of the basses that I like to use it's like the Subtractor basic patch called Bass. It's just and it's still
awesome, dude.
It's still funky, and it's a very, very analog, like just has a nice warmth to it. And so yeah, I mean, if it's not broken, there's a few go-to Reason patches that I definitely still swear by. So
yeah, they got some really good. That's like, I think has always been one of their strengths. Reason has been their stock sounds have been like better than almost any other DAW's stock sounds that I've ever seen. Probably any that I've ever come across. Notwithstanding the lack of VSTs forever and the lack of VST3 still. They say this month, or I guess, by the time this podcast airs, maybe it's already out and people are like, what are they talking about? That update came out, but we record ahead of time. We're prepared, folks.
I've definitely heard that from more than just you two, that like Reason has an incredible ability to make pretty much anything that you want just with the stock stuff, which I'm sure is kind of fun to produce in, because you don't have to reach for all this other expensive stuff. Like you have everything you need already, even though the next shiny thing is always like, oh man, I mean, when did they get VST2 support?
Oh, was that was
8?
I think it was 9. So I don't know. It was a few years back. They're on 11 now.
Just like
it's like like three entire years ago. Yeah, like
they're on.
Oh, they're on 12 now. They're on 12.
Yeah,
I still have 11.
Yeah, me too. I haven't pushed up. They're really pushing heavily for like the subscription thing where you get all the stuff. I was like, I don't know. I already bought 11. Like I did. There's a couple new things, but again, like the amount of stuff you can do, like the new things are just making it maybe a little bit easier. But I already have like there's a new sampler, but I use Serato sample for chopping samples and stuff already, and I already really like the way it works and the way it sounds and the way it manipulates the samples. So it's just like, I don't need to upgrade.
Yeah, I feel like at a certain point, like when you're like a beginner or intermediate, you like always want the next like shiny thing, because you feel like it's going to make you a better producer or like give you a leg up, because maybe you're not as good. Like if I have this cool thing, I can make this cool thing that no one else can, because, I'm the first person to get it or whatever. And then like, as you actually get good, then you're like, not really interested in new stuff, because like how to use some stuff that you already have really, really well, and that stuff's probably also kind of become integral to your sound, like your the sounds you've made and the racks you've built and all this stuff is kind of like integral to your sound. So you're kind of like, well, I don't really need anything else. And nowadays, like on Black Friday, I'll pick up like a plugin or two. And that's the only day all year that I buy anything. But it's just like, I think with my workflow and like my sound, like this thing could be cool as well. But like that desire to just like grab the next thing and like hope that it's going to make me sound cooler, it's just like, it just doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah, I think
it's Sooth too.
Yeah.
If you don't
I
have
feel
that,
like
definitely.
it's a little bit of it's a little bit of both, because I think you're right. You can pretty much do anything. And that's why it's funny. I engage in it, but it's, when people argue about which DAW is the best, it's like PlayStation or Xbox. It's like they do the same shit. They're just, it's what you're used to. But like there is, if getting to, for a while, I kind of went through that where I'd buy things and I wouldn't really use it because I didn't take the time to learn. I'm like, oh, I already know what it does. I already know what it does. But now that I had realized that I wanted to have more, like I really wanted some warm synth sounds. Speaking of warm synth sounds,
Yeah, I was gonna say, is there some sort of synth tone coming?
it's nice. It was a nice underpinning.
A little binaural beat.
That was like the most producer thing to happen in an interview ever. That was amazing.
I accidentally
man,
set my
got
phone
it.
down on the keyboard instead of the desk.
always gotta have the synths ready.
Classic.
But yeah, like if you know what sound you're wanting, like I said, I knew I wanted, and a lot of it comes from just hearing somebody else had it and be like, what the hell is that? And be like, oh yeah, this is Arturia. And I did that 3 times. Like it was within like a week span. Like I was collaborating with some people, and every time like somebody played something, I was like, what is that? Arturia. The next day, what is that? Arturia. And I was like, all right, I'll get it. And it's been a good purchase, but definitely got to be careful about doing that. Like if you want certain things, you got to make sure you don't already have them. Yeah. Because then it gets redundant.
Yeah.
So speaking of VSTs, what are some go-tos for you? Like what are, if you could only have like a couple available to you, what would be your first go-to?
Well, I really like the well, I mean, there's a lot of the stock Reason ones. For drums, I just like I have a sampler and I just have a ridiculous collection of drum sounds. So I don't know. I guess maybe set that aside. I just use the Kong in Reason usually. That mixed with the Reason stock. Like basically they have they have a lot of VSTs of it, but it's basically just, it sounds like a real drum kit. It's like all the keys are really sensitive. To, with the hi-hats and stuff. I use that pretty much on every track, just because a little ride hit here or a little hi-hat hit. It just gives the kind of the more realistic feel to it. But then I really like the Rickenbacker bass in Contact, so I use that bass a lot. But I would say like Contact is one, and then all this shit that is in Arturia is amazing. Like
crazy
the
collection.
The Mini V, I don't even remember what they're all called. Like it has the Jupiter. Just all the emulations of the real synths are really, really cool. Besides that, like I said, I even still, compared to a lot of people, like there's people that have like Omnisphere and all these things. I literally the only 2 that I bought outside of Reason is Complete and Arturia just recently. So.
Dude, I have Omnisphere, and the only 2 things I use it for are bells and choir.
In memoriam all day.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I've used that in like probably 3 different tracks.
Classic.
It's so funny that like I thought, I was like, oh, this is sick. And there's so many presets in Omnisphere. You're like, oh my God, like there's no way I'm rinsing someone else's shit. And then like, I swear to God, like Goat by Polyphia uses In Memoriam out of Omnisphere. I was like, no way. Like you notice
every trap producer too.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you start to know those sounds, and that's the problem. Like, and again, that you can run into with samples. Like, I do use Splice, but I notice when people use Splice and they just drop a loop in. But again, like I feel like you got to manipulate it. Like you can. That's what I like doing, especially because they're royalty-free loops. But then if you treat it like an old sample or something and chop it up or rearrange it, pitch it, slow it down. One of the things that I really I felt like I stepped a level up is when I was collaborating with Trap a lot. We both use Reason, which is also a really helpful tool. As he was showing me all this crazy shit, I started bouncing. It's funny because you have different ways of approaching the same program. So it's funny specifically when you're watching somebody use a program you use and they do things differently, and we're like correcting each other, like, hey, do it like that. And you're like, well, no, I do it like this way. But one thing he does that got me into it, that I do on every track now, is bouncing any MIDI file to a wave. Just because you can manipulate them in different ways, and like reversing them, and when you pitch bend them and you stretch them, it sounds a little bit different. And it just gives it, like any melody I have, if it's like the main melody of the track, without a doubt, I have already, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I'll bounce it, pitch it up an octave or pitch it down an octave and blend those together. And then like automate automate it so they kind of breathe throughout the track. So it doesn't really feel like you're hearing a different melody, but you could be listening to the same melody that just looped, but then you have the high one kind of come in and then go down, or have a different effect on it, have a little bit more reverb. And so it's just like different sounds, but it just kind of gives it a more atmospheric blend. And, and then doing stuff like little stop, like I can't remember the term you called it, but like the stops where you cut everything out. And if you have a MIDI, sometimes it'll just ring out a little bit, but if you have the wave, you can cut and then it.
Cutting reverb tails. We call it checkerboarding.
There you go. Yeah. So things like that. So yeah, it's, all the tricks of the trade, that's another way where people are like, how do you're only using Reason stuff. I'm just like, well, I'm, going crazy with the Reason shit. Cause I'm like blending 3 layers of the same one to create one sound.
Well, I think also the people that are like, oh, you're only using Reason stuff. Like they don't use Reason. Like they don't know. Like they use
they got a crack of Reason 5 in 2007 and we're like, this is cool, but it's limited, and then assumed that it didn't change over 7 versions.
They never even got the crack, bro. They just got the crack of Ableton. And then I mean, for most people, Ableton stock stuff, if it's not the suite with that. I mean, even the suite, like I couldn't really make music with just Ableton stock stuff. So I think most people would probably just assume that Reason doesn't have any expensive sounding stuff.
Yeah, I've definitely run into both those misconceptions.
Speaking of Ableton stock, I feel you. I've been going through the stock library recently, and there's hella Sophie-esque sounds and like futuristic sounding shit that I never would have expected being in there. And I think also a big key is like download all the additional shit from the site. That's huge. I don't know if Reason has anything like that, but
it did, and that was one of the things. There was I again like the drums that I used. Like there's one that I've used that I've literally had since like Reason 4. I don't know where it was, like on some refill download that was free at a particular time, but then they stopped making it, and so I just have this one, and I really just like the way that there's one setting on it that makes the hi-hat sound really nice and realistic, and so I still use it, and I don't remember exactly how, but it was off one of those things where there's like some download. So that you definitely want to get the curated downloaded stuff that they have for each and whatever your DAW of choice is. But yeah, it is funny because like we were talking about when I first started with Ableton, I don't really know many of the stock sounds because at that point I was just sampling, so I'd be chopping, and I wasn't playing stuff at that time either. I was like placing a lot of stuff, so I got really intricate with, and that's why it's funny tying back to when Trap was telling me about printing stuff, because then it was going back into what I was doing, is taking the waves, placing them, and you could really with automating different sounds and having them the checkerboard and stuff, doing all that stuff really gave me a lot of freedom. And I used to do all of that in Ableton because that was the only basically all I would do in that is just mess with the wave files, and then coming back from having a little more experience with playing shit, incorporating, like I said, gathering the knowledge, taking the L's, learning the lessons. It all helps.
Taking the L's, that's huge.
No producer has ever got
lessons
to sounding great without taking so many L's.
It helps build your like, if you hear and know, then you're not, and you're like broken by that, then you're not ready for making it a long way doing this stuff.
You're just not.
Better not send anything to a label ever, because you're just gonna get crushed all over the place.
Well, honestly, you're lucky to get crushed by the label. You're probably gonna get ignored. You're probably just gonna get no response ever. Even if they read it, they're not even gonna respond. Like,
it's a very good point. I'd even go so far as say I'd rather people hate it than feel indifferent. I feel like if people hate it and strongly hate it, you're at least on the right track. Well,
and see, and that's you're learning is because that's when you hear something, even if it hurts, you at least know, instead of like, well, did they not listen to it, or maybe they were looking for something else, but they didn't tell me they were looking for something else, so I don't know. So now I have to guess. And, it could have just been maybe they skipped over it and it was the perfect thing that they were looking for, but they just didn't get to it because they didn't like how you labeled your email or whatever. Like, you never know.
But that's another thing too. Like once you're like good, like you understand that indifferent is the worst case scenario. You're like, wow, I just made the most generic, forgettable piece of garbage ever. But like when you're good and someone doesn't like it, like, I mean, I'm not saying that you're like, oh yeah, like they don't like it because that means someone else will. But like, at that point, that like if someone hates it, someone else will like it. like good art divides the audience, right? And like when you're just like getting going and someone hates it, it's like it just crushes you, and you just got to really work through it.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, I like what you said about how, getting out there, whether, it's getting, submitting to feedback for somebody or getting on stage, or, even collabing with people, just having other ears on your music and other opinions on your creative process. You do have to learn that self-confidence to like take it and not be crushed. But you learn so much through that process, not only not how to be crushed, but so many cool tips and tricks and, ways to think about your music, ways to conceptualize little things to do inside your DAW that you just, man, I never knew about that feature. Like both of us, every time I work with somebody that uses Reason, I always like, oh damn, I never thought about using that tool that way. That's crazy. It's like, yeah, that's just the most natural thing to me. Shit.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think I've always, and I would say this was a revelation as I was taking this more seriously. Is collaborating with people is the super way to level up, because you learn that, like, hearing someone else's ears, like Chap was saying, just the way people do something differently. Like if you pick out certain elements, and it helps you as like a human too, because you may like think something's the shit, and then if you hear immediately like, well, what about this? Maybe you're gonna have sometimes where you butt heads about an idea, but then you try things. You try things in different ways. You have it's just a way to expand your sound without. It's really hard to do I would imagine it's really hard to do by yourself, because every time I've had a good collaborative, like effort with somebody, I've definitely, I've picked things up, and I've noticed how it changed my sound a little bit, and just being able to go in those specific bags. And not to mention, you also can use your strengths. Like I've started collaborating with people. I've really, worked on drums for a long time. So even though I think I can make really cool melodies, I've been working with this guy named Sean Hibbler. He goes by BlackaDinMe on social media. And he's one of the guys that lives here in Atlanta. It's probably been one of the coolest things about moving here. I knew he was going to be here, but we had actually collaborated a few times. We were working on a project together, and we were collaborating over Zoom, and we made some really cool stuff. And then once we met in person, it's just, we both really, and this is what I was talking about, making the kind of the funky stuff. He's been playing, in church and playing keys for years and years and years. So he's incredible, but he also plays things that are the keys, but like he can play a bass that sounds real. He can play a guitar. Like we made some tracks where he plays a guitar and it sounds like somebody's, shredding an electric guitar. It's just really fun because we have a similar outlook on what we like to make, but the things that I can't do very well, he's perfect at, and the things that that he can't do as well, I excel at. And so it just, not only learning new things along the way, but just being able to accentuate each other's strengths, you can create some really cool stuff.
Amen.
Yeah. I feel like watching whenever you have that collab, and I know, at least speaking from my own personal experience, you sit down at the computer and you have someone else sitting there, like you're not gonna fuddle around with like the okay stuff. You're gonna you're gonna hit your instinctual stuff because you want it to sound good right away. So like the opposite of like watching someone else sit down at the computer and you're sitting next to them, like their instinctual moves, like you should be paying attention, because those are probably going to be like their like quickest get to something that sounds good stuff. And that's always like, even if the track doesn't end up sounding good, like the stuff you can teach each other just by literally sitting there and watching them use the same program that you do, like you'll be better off after it.
Totally. And you kind of, a lot of moments arise too. I know that like me and Trav have had plenty of these where like you'll make some stuff and you can be like, but if it's like, if you after making something for like, 20, 30 minutes, trying some different things, you'll know that there's like a moment. And that's what's so cool about collaborating specifically in person, is like, just because you'll even if it's like out of the corner of your eye, like someone will start playing and you'll see like both people just start immediately, both people like kind of light up and you're like, okay, cool. That's the sound we need to go for. Let's build off of that. And I just feel like, collaborating in general is great for that, but that's why even in person is just just that little extra bit, just because you have that energy in the room, and super fun.
Yeah, it's really hard to run out of ideas, whether you're working on beats or lyrics. Like just having multiple minds in the room, it always just adds that one element of unpredictableness that always just keeps you out of your comfort zone. And that's the biggest thing I've learned in the last couple of years. Whenever I've gotten into my comfort zone, it's like when I felt the most demotivated and just hated my own stuff and whatever. It's like as soon as you get in the studio with somebody else, like they'll throw out just that one idea that you never would have thought of, and then like I'll go on like 3-4 month kind of just exploration phase on like just that one little detail that they threw in that I never would have thought of, until that shit gets stale, and then bam, get back in the studio, find that other little thing.
Yeah, that synergy of collaboration is so real. Like you said, they'll come up with an idea you never would have thought of, and it'll spark something in you that they never would have thought of. And then that sparks something in them that never would have happened unless both of y'all were in the room. You know, it's like, it's so powerful. So, yeah.
Yeah,
Whether
sometimes you
it's
just
Zoom
need
or
another.
in person, depending on your level of COVID restriction.
Yeah.
Get collab in, humans.
Yeah, even sometimes you just need somebody to be like, "No, you're doing good, man. Like,
Yeah.
don't think about it too hard. Like, that's actually dope." And then you just get out of your own way and like,
It's funny. I was literally just going to say that, like, because that is a big thing. Like, you know, we're all producers. We know we like to, like, you know, well, at least I feel like there's always the moment when after you've collaborated with someone where it's like before you're leaving, yo, let me play a few of the new beats I've been working on, or at the sometimes doing it that at the beginning, because someone that's like, well, let me try this thing for you, because we're all sensitive about our shit. We're artists. Sometimes we get in our own head, you know, because like there's one of those times where you're working on something all night, it's the craziest, dopest thing you listen to in the morning, and you're like, what in the fuck?
Yeah.
So being able to bounce it off somebody else, especially at this time where we've all been, you know, locked in a little bit more, you know, away from everybody more than normal. You're getting that little boost of somebody being like, oh yeah, that's dope. Like that sounds really cool. And again, you might have spent 6 hours staring at your screen, listening to the same loop, and then you get, you know, freaked out because you didn't, you know, but they hear it right off the bat and they're like, oh, you know, I have a perfect top line for that. Boom, boom. And then there you go. But yeah, definitely bouncing off ideas. Not only obviously the actual collaborative process, you know, is important, but just getting, you know, someone's ears that you trust and having them get excited about your stuff sometimes gives you a little boost that, you know, you didn't know, like maybe you were a little bit in like a little zone where you couldn't be that, you know, I guess creative. And sometimes it's just getting a little pat on the back of like, hey man, this shit's actually pretty dope. Like explore that sound. Don't worry about it too much.
Amen.
Yeah,
sure.
for sure.
I'm curious, for your own music that you're doing nowadays, are you working primarily with vocalists and rappers? Are you doing more of the beat tape kind of side? And if you are working with artists,
yeah, I'm both. I have a lot of unreleased stuff with so there's a couple artists that I'd like to. I've gone the route of I'm considering just, you know, starting to sell beats to whoever, you know, just sending out packs here and there. But like I really wanted to create like specific sounds with artists and will only work with like not really a wide range of artists, or a wide range, I guess, in like what they're capable of doing, but people that I like vibe with on a personal level. There's a guy in Seattle named Marl, really dope. I met him at an event where actually DJ THMP was there and playing beats, and he introduced himself as a producer, but then they were freestyling and he started freestyling, and I was like, what the fuck? He's literally one of the better freestylers that I've heard, whether it be the cadence and the stuff he's saying is crazy. So we just really hit it off right off the bat. So we've collaborated on beats. We work together a lot. We've kind of shaped a sound. We've tried boom bap stuff. We've tried trap stuff. We've done the kind of vibey stuff I was talking about. And it's just fun because he's in the way that I like to be, explore different sounds. You know, as a producer, he does the same thing as an artist, and we've complemented each other in that way. So he's one that's really dope that I've worked with. There's a rapper named Osbee Chill, who's a really dope, like kind of goes back to my West Coast kind of boom bap, kind of G-funk sound. We have a couple projects worth of shit that, you know, just waiting for the time to drop it. It's kind of the ball's in kind of his court on that one. But then, yeah, I've worked with a couple of like I said, I like to explore different things. There's an artist I'm working with who's actually in the UK that I met on Clubhouse, named Ilana, and she's really dope. We have like something I never would have made. It's like ballad-esque. It's something I could hear it. Like it could be maybe great for like a sync or something, like almost like an intro of like a series or something. Is really cool. A rapper named Latnie. We just put out a couple tracks. You know, been working on stuff here in Atlanta. And then, the stuff I'm working on with Sean, I actually have we did a beat tape. We actually did a joint beat battle. It's some of the favorite beats that I've made. We spent a lot of time working on them, but it's 10 tracks, like a minute and a half long. I put it on Bandcamp, so it's in my Instagram profile. The project's called Classified. We call each other Agent Black was the name that we came up with on a whim until it changes. That's what it's going to be, as a mix between our names. But yeah, it's really cool if you want to hear kind of the type of stuff that I do for like a beat battle. So we're going to continue doing things like that. I have a lot of beats that are kind of easy listening, lo-fi type of stuff. So I've definitely wanted to do all the, basically answer your question, yes, and a lot of artists I'm working with. I really want to make like records. I think if I had to choose one thing I really want to do is I want to make really cool records and work with artists, because that's what I've done, but I don't have tons of stuff out. But I also want to continue making, as an artist, I guess myself, whether it be performing, doing shows like beat battles, things, showcases, or just putting out things that could be on playlists that people listen to. Because when I was starting making beats, I listened to a lot of things like RJD2, Blockhead,
love,
like Peach Instrumentals, just lots of like instrumental hip hop, and just loved it, and like listening to it while I was like doing homework or just whatever, playing sports or whatever, just having beats where you don't necessarily need lyrics. So I definitely want to expand on that as well, especially now that am able to create the sounds that I was trying to when I back in the day when I wasn't as good. So yeah, all of that, but definitely want to work with artists and get some stuff out. Enjoyed the balance of having rappers and also working with singers, just because they approach things differently. I think also having a rapper and a singer on one track is really cool. So just then there's a few other artists that I haven't mentioned, that just because I don't want to go through naming each individual person I'm working with. Sure. But it's all people that I just, like I said, I believe in, that I get to sit down with and kind of discuss how things are, just a sound rather than just like shooting a shot in the dark. Like, hey, here's a beat, do your thing with it. I think you create a better product when you're, both invested in it.
1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah. Amen, man. I didn't even know about that Agent Black tape. I got to go check that out.
Yeah.
You have to send me the link, man.
Yeah, I will.
I'll put it in the show notes too.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that'd be dope.
Link down below.
Yeah, hey, there you go. Bandcamp is something that, again, like when I know it's something that's been around for a long time, but getting with those communities that like to do the sampling and stuff. A lot of people put stuff out because there is in beat battling, as I've mentioned before, like, Trap mentioned, like the Hit the Road Jack or the Hold the Line, songs that I can't clear. You can put them up there, and for the most part, people don't seem to care. It's not, nobody's getting their songs, struck down for anything like that. And I feel like the mentality has changed too. It's like, if my song is getting to the point where somebody wants to sue me over it, or to give a strike down order, it's like, well, that means probably millions of people have heard it, and that's not the best, the worst thing to happen. So, like
they said in The Wire, that's one of them, what do you call it? Good problem.
Exactly.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Go for it, Trap.
I was gonna say, what what are your aspirations? Where do you see yourself in a few years? What do you want to have accomplished? So speak that into existence for you.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to, I'm working while I'm doing all this, so I would like to kind of make a living off of the stuff that I'm making. But just building relationships, I think getting some, because that's pretty much what it seems to be. Like, I feel like at a certain level you get to a threshold where I'm always going to be improving. I think my music's always going to be getting better, but I feel like it's at a point where the qualities there just need to be able to get it to the right people. But also creating the right people, I guess, in a sense, like not necessarily like chasing. I feel like I'm always going to be, if I have a placement opportunity, trying to send stuff out, or, like I said, scoring a film is a bucket list thing, or like an anime. Like I saw Samurai, when I first saw Samurai Champloo, it was anime that was scored by Fat John and Nujabes, and just super dope, like jazzy hip hop beats, and with dope kung fu, just crazy martial art anime. It's a really dope combination. So doing something like that would be fun. But yeah, just getting a like a group of artists that's consistently putting stuff out that, because I feel like the music's going to be good and that everything's going to grow eventually, but just having consistent people, like you said, we don't like the sending stuff out. You don't hear anything back. But if you have those relationships, you hear back a lot more often than not. So kind of broadening that network.
Atlanta seems like a great place to do that.
Exactly.
I mean,
that was
good call. I
idea.
miss you. I miss you out here in Seattle. No cap, but
no, likewise.
Oh, wait, cap. You're always wearing a cap. It says H&M. Right. Branding. We had an episode on branding a few weeks back.
Yeah, I gotta step that up a little bit. I think that's part of being my own, because I'm cool with being behind the scenes and being a part of projects. But that's where I think I could do both. You could be a part of the projects with artists where they're the face of it, but then doing our own thing. Like I said, if it's whether it be beat tapes or scoring animations, films.
A lot of animation and film in Georgia too.
Yep.
Yeah, they've really been pushing that there.
One thing I'm curious, maybe my favorite question to ask, I feel like every 3-4 months you kind of pick up a new technique that levels you up as a producer or sends you down a new rabbit hole or whatever. And I'm curious if you found any new production techniques or just mindset shifts or, anything like that that's been, at the forefront of your production lately.
I think...
And while you think, I fuck with that trick that you said about layering the sounds and automating them to get the ambience, man, I feel like I'm gonna be doing that every track now.
Yeah, man, trust me, you won't look back because it just gives the extra little auditory treats for you.
Literally did that on a track with Shoes last night. We were working and it's that Who You Gonna Call? It's really close, Evan. We're gonna send it to you on this next draft.
Good. I'm waiting. I've been waiting, dude.
Evan was like, dude, where the fuck is that track you played in Montana that one time?
Like so many
very
times.
specific.
Yeah, like 2.5 years ago.
So many times I've asked.
It's almost done
one of
now.
My favorites. Well, that's great because it is one of my favorites by you guys.
Yep.
Damn, this whole time I've been thinking about. I don't know, because I guess one thing is because it's something that I've done, but something that I've relied a lot more on. Well, actually, I guess this would qualify, and I think Trap will find this funny, but I finally made a beat template. I had the longest. I feel like sometimes I would discover things differently from having to go into a folder, and as I'm skipping down to the drum sound that I like to go to, I'm like, oh, I like that sound or whatever. But now that I have a lot of sounds that I like having, where I pop up on a beat and I can just immediately have drums that I know sound good, whether I use them or not. I know they sound good. Then I know there's a piano, there's a Rhodes that I like, there's a bass, I'll have like a normal bass, I'll have an 808. So just no matter what type of beat I'm going into, I can immediately, and I think a lot of that is working with artists and having them sit there, is because a lot of times they don't want like a full beat. And it's another just aspect of, working one-on-one with them as opposed to sending them something is, a lot of times they'll catch a vibe off of something really simple, like maybe just some very simple drums and just one chord or like two, like one chord progression without adding anything else. Then they're like, okay. And then they want to write to that. So having a template is, just being able to go through different options, different sounds, having some vocals over here, having, everything just in its place already, just, obviously streamlines the process, but it just, you have your go-to stuff right there. And I think as I do that more, I'll probably have multiple. I'll expand and have different beat starts for specific types of specific genres, I guess. But at the moment, I just kind of have like the sauce of all the things that I kind of go to and just have them right there. So I think that's helped, just because it's got me to whip up. I can get a solid beat, especially even a loop, just done really quickly. And also experimenting into doing that a little bit. Loops, I've kind of gone back and forth about like putting something out, like some drums or something like that. But there's just so much of that. I maybe making loops, but then just sending them to specific people. So it's not like a very wide spread thing, but just being able to cook up in little sessions. Like, maybe I have a half an hour here or half an hour there, having all that stuff there instead of spending the time loading it all up. I can just create something. And then I have like a drum loop for myself for a later date, or like a melody that I can send to somebody else or something like that. So yeah, I guess I'll say that, because, that in addition with getting all the new Arturia sounds, which has also been the last couple months.
Hey.
has definitely been a plus.
All right, y'all heard it, humans. All right, tell them how to get a hold of you on the interwebs.
So I have a website that I'm, slowly trying to upgrade and get SEO'd correctly and all that good stuff. Is agentmbeats.com. I got, beats on there for people that want to purchase the beats, but the best way is just to get in touch with me, because the website may be going through growing pains from time to time. On social media, it's Agent M Beats at, that's just Agent M Beats.
Yeah, at Agent M Beats.
Yeah, I was going to say in my emails, agentmbeats@gmail. Agent M Beats is kind of everywhere, whether it be. But Instagram is a good place. That's where the link to the Bandcamp is. It's Agent M Beats at Bandcamp or .bandcamp if you want to grab that project. Yeah, and I think that's probably the best. My website or Instagram for, get me on the DM or whatever. That'd be the best way.
And just like we were talking about on that branding episode, like make sure you can get the exact same handle across everywhere and just be like, yup, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here, I'm here. One thing, you can find me whichever network you're on. See, you're killing it.
Yeah, that's funny.
We always see where we can level up, but you got like the level.
100%. There's an engineer that I worked with that I hadn't sent stuff to in a while, and I forgot. And his name is something. His email is something completely different. So I was like scouring my email trying to figure out. And it's just some random phrase or something. I'm just like, man, come on, you got to get with it. Just cross the board. Just have the same shit.
Yeah.
So definitely pick that up early on. It's definitely a gem to.
Yes, indeed. Well, y'all know how we sign this out. Peace, humans. And peace among worlds.
Yo, thanks for coming on, man.
Yes, sir. H&M in the building. Woo! All right, humans. Thank you so much for being here with us and my dude, Agent M. I love that guy. So glad he could finally be on a podcast. Great to have him. Make sure to go follow him at Agent M Beats. Follow us at Human Music Pod on Twitter and at The Human Music Podcast on Instagram, etc. And find us at thehumanmusicpodcast.com. Support our sponsors, Dojo TV, free producer live stream classes from the Dojo Senseis, Yummy Strums, so you can get guitar samples, loops, one-shots, and more from Tesko and Company. The weekly download, where you can learn from Il Gateson's private weekly group lessons and get access to over 250 more episodes for just $20 a month. And guest practices, where you can learn from Seth Drake, the approach suit. He's the best engineer we know, and your first class is free. Make sure to go and buy that Agent Black Classified. Links down below. And hit up Agent M's new track, Marinatin, on Spotify and all streaming services. Yeah, next week we got another good homie of mine, Hayden THC, and you will not want to miss that episode. It's amazing. All right, y'all. Till then, peace. Peace among worlds.
I like it.